So, how do I go about maintaining this vehicle? How does it get serviced and what are the service intervals? Let's get straight into it. So, I think the first thing we should talk about is additional servicing, which I think a lot of people may not be aware of, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. So, I've got the service book here, and in the back of the service book, at least for a Toyota anyway, I'm sure it's the same for other manufacturers, you'll find a spot for the additional maintenance schedules, which is the maintenance that should take place in between your main services. So for these, it's every 10,000, 10, 20, 30, 40, so on and so on. So your additional maintenance takes place at 5,000 kilometer intervals. So you have your main service at say 40,000 and then an additional service at 45. Main service at 50, additional service at 55. And as we can see here, the additional servicing is all recorded at the back of the book. So now I'm going to read straight from this book the conditions that would require additional servicing according to Toyota. And if you don't know these, they may shock you. These conditions include any or all of the following: driving on rough, muddy or snow-melted roads, driving on dusty roads, towing trailers, caravans, boats, etc., repeated short trips, less than 8 kilometers in freezing conditions, extensive idling and or low-speed driving, etc., continuous high-speed driving at speeds greater than 140 kilometers an hour for more than 2 hours, and using fuel from non-commercial suppliers storage. So, as it says here, that's for any or all of the following. So for example, the driving on dusty roads. How many people with four drives drive on dusty roads? Technically speaking, going by the manufacturer, you should do in between services if you're doing that. So, I mean, technically that's like if you had a gravel driveway leading up to your home. Obviously that's ridiculous and that's not going to require additional servicing. So my rig gets serviced at my local Toyota dealership. I also get them to carry out the in-between services. So I've G'd that up with them. I explained right around the time when I first got this that that's what I will be doing, because obviously this vehicle operates in extreme service conditions all the time. That's its life. That's what it does. Basically what I get them to do with the in-between services, obviously follow what the book says. It's relatively simple. Every 5,000 I get the oil dropped. I get a new oil filter. They inspect the air filter. I make sure they give it a full underbody grease and just a general inspection. With my experience with doing that, they go over the vehicle anyway and give it an inspection and check brakes and check the tread that's on the tires and if all your lights and everything are working, because it's been through their workshop, they have a responsibility. They can't just drop the oil and send it out. They've got to actually do a bit of an inspection. You know, they don't want to service your rig and then send it out and the tail lights aren't working and you have a crash. Then that's kind of on them. Look, on my old Land Cruiser, I used to do almost all of my own servicing, and I had no problems with doing that in the shed here. Obviously my old Cruiser was way out of warranty, so I didn't really worry. I'd love to be doing my own in between servicing with this because obviously it's cheaper, but you know, it's a new rig, so I've been toying with the idea and I might just start doing it anyway, but at the moment Toyota does it. Basically for me, as I said, and as most of you guys would know, this rig operates in extreme service conditions. Lots of kilometers, dusty roads, if it rains, there's mud, there's creek crossings, there's all sorts of stuff, you know. So I'm really trying to look after it as best as I can. Now, depending on your usage, additional servicing could also mean to change diff oils and inspect bearings, repack bearings or replace bearings a lot more often than you would think, because if you're doing a lot of deep water crossings, it's not that hard for water to enter the diffs and into the bearings, obviously. Now, obviously, if you're doing that kind of work, you're probably going to have extended diff breathers, but even if you don't, if you're doing a lot of deep water crossings with hot diffs, obviously you hit the cold water, the diffs can suck water in past the seals and whatnot. Now, an additional thing to keep an eye on is your condenser or radiator area. Mine fills up pretty quickly with bugs and especially grass seeds. Same goes for the intercooler. It can fill up pretty quickly with bugs and also grass seeds. So, I don't know, tell me what you think and let me know in the comments what's your service schedule, maintenance schedule look like for your vehicle? Do you stick purely to the manufacturer's recommendations, or do you do additional servicing? As I mentioned before, these are 10,000. Most of Toyota stuff is 10,000, like with the four-wheel drives. There's manufacturers these days that are pushing them out to 15 or more. I don't agree with that. Obviously, engines run a lot cleaner now. We have better oils. Technology is better in general. But also, a lot of that's just plain marketing. Like, I see a lot of people do whinge about, like, oh, Toyota's still got 10,000 kilometer intervals. I think that's good. I actually like that. I think it's smart. Yes, if you went with a different manufacturer and stretch your service intervals out, it's going to be kind of on your pocket at the time. But in my opinion, like I said, a lot of it's marketing. Obviously, when you go to buy a brand new car and you're in the lot and you're looking, and there's a car over here that has 10,000 intervals and this one has 15 or 20, it's, they're going to tell you it's a lot cheaper. It's cheaper to run, it's cheaper to maintain. Well, for the short term, sure. And look, these days, that may suit most people because, the majority of people probably aren't flogging their rigs out bush. And also, even if they are, how long do people really hang on to cars these days? I think I was looking at some stats a while ago, and I think most people trade before 5 years. So it probably doesn't really matter. You're going to keep your car for the warranty period and then flog it off. But for me personally, obviously, this rig means a lot to me, and full driving means a lot to me, and I use it for work as well. And, this is a vehicle that I plan on holding on to basically forever. I want to drive the wheels off it and see how much of a run I can have with it. So it's my pride and joy. I want to look after it, and the additional servicing just helps so much. So now that we've basically covered the in-between services, like every 5,000, there's also servicing that, in my opinion, should be done. Look, I'm not telling you what to do either. I'm not a bloody qualified mechanic or whatever. This is just what I do, and showing you what is in the back of the service book, like that you actually should carry out additional servicing according to the manufacturer, and it just makes sense on any machine. If you know anything about machines in general, or you're mechanically minded, it just makes sense. So, for example, back in the day when I used to drive a grader, used to grade the Tanami Road all the way to the WA border, and we used to grease our machines every single day. Now, obviously, we were pretty much running those machines ragged, sun up to sun down, and but every second you got a chance, you jumped out of the cab, have a quick smoke and a wee or whatever. You give the steering linkages a grease and whatnot. So, like I said, every 5,000 this gets a grease. But if it rains out of nowhere and I've driven through a bunch of water, not necessarily deep, but just water in general, the minute I get back to the shed, I give it a grease. And I guess that kind of goes into what I was saying before about deep water crossings and checking bearings and all that kind of stuff. Look, there is other things you can look at as well, like just generally looking at your vehicle, looking for anything that maybe has come loose in the engine bay or even underneath, nuts and bolts. It's always good just to have a general check of things if you're driving, rough conditions a lot of the time, heavy corrugations and that sort of stuff. It never hurts just to always be looking at stuff. And if you do that from the start of getting your vehicle, then you get used to how things should look and how things should be. Now look, as far as bearings go on these rigs, they're actually supposed to be inspected and repacked or replaced every 20,000 kilometers. And I know I've heard a lot of people whinge about that and say it's high and whatever. Look, it is what it is. So that's what Toyota do with this rig. Every 20,000 they have a look, they repack. On my Silver Cruiser, my 2008, the longest stretch I went before inspecting and re-greasing bearings was, I think, 60,000 kilometers, either 50 or 60,000 kilometers. And by that time, they needed doing, but I never had a problem. That was running 33-inch tires with a negative 50 offset rim on the back. So, like the book says every 20, and you should probably do that because that's what it says, and like that is the way to do it. But I've stretched them out to 50 or 60, and again, that's with the vehicle working pretty hard. Let me know in the comments what you reckon and how you serviced your rig, and let me know if I've missed anything. Obviously, I haven't. Obviously, this is a relatively simple service video on the way that I do things and I believe things should be done. There is a lot of other stuff that you can do. This is just kind of covering the general surface level stuff and the stuff that should be maintained pretty regularly, in my opinion. I also carry around with me service items like a grease gun, spare fuel filter, air filters, some other bits and bobs. In the event that I'm in the middle of bloody nowhere and I need to, the fuel filter light comes on or whatever it may be. So I always carry those items with me. Cheers. Take it easy. So your in-between services are, obviously you would do, say, a main service at 10. So your additional maintenance takes place between those services of